Good morning, folks. Welcome back to Nebraska. Finally feeling like winter out here. We were down to 11 degrees this morning, is what my Silverado said on the dashboard. So we made a trip into town and we went by our local seed store to check out a grill I've been looking at for a while. I just wanted to look at it and see what the size looked like in person and stuff like that, to see which model I wanted, because it comes in 3 different models, 3 different sizes. So when I got there, I found out that it was $100 cheaper than what I'd been looking at Home Depot. And right now they're running a special where it comes with a free rotisserie kit. And the manager there also told me that he's already having problems getting these in stock due to supply chain issues, and that the ones that he's getting will be even more expensive than the Home Depot price because of the supply chain, and the prices are probably going to go up by like $200. So it was time to pull the trigger on this thing. I bought me a little charcoal grill just to get me by since we moved out here. But I really missed my pellet grill. But I've been wanting to build something for some time now. I've had this idea in my head. I was going to make a grill that had the same auger feed as like a pellet grill, but use charcoal briquettes instead. So briquettes are obviously a lot cheaper than the pellets, usually, and the lump charcoal. But a company called Masterbuilt came out with this. This is the 800 series. This is the middle of the road model. And I don't need the crazy big one. And the small one was just a hair too small. And this one comes with a flat top grill insert that you can use. So this is the one I had my eye on, so I pulled the trigger today. And there's the free rotisserie kit that come with it. So this is some assembly required. And I will warn you, this thing is too heavy for one person. I had to use the pallet forks on the tractor to get this out of the truck. So I realize some of you, being guys like me, don't like to read directions. So I thought, being mostly visual learners, we would go through how to set this thing up and put it together. So if you didn't want to read the directions, you could watch the video and just pause the video at times, and might be a little easier than reading the directions, and you can see any mistakes that I make or things that I find along the way. So I'm going to get the wood stove going here in the shop because it's a little nippy, and we'll start putting this thing together. Stick around. All right, we got it warming up in here. We've been unboxing our new grill. The first tip I'm going to share with you is a real easy one. Once you cut the plastic straps that go around this box, the whole box lifts off of the base. I opened the top of the box and was unloading all this stuff manually. Hard to get the styrofoam and everything out, and then come to find out you can just lift the whole box off. So you can do that, make it a lot easier on yourself. So here's the parts list. We got parts scattered all over the shop. Lots and lots of parts. So one of the first steps they tell you to do is to assemble this with 2 people if you can. Well, we're going to not do that already. And they say to assemble it on cardboard. So we're going to lay that flat on the floor as to keep everything clean. And we'll figure out what the first step's going to be. So the tools you're going to need are a Phillips head screwdriver, adjustable wrench, a 19 millimeter socket. Thank God it's not 10 millimeter. Approximate assembly time is 1 hour and 45 minutes. And I'm sure this is going to be all of that. So first thing they tell you to do is to put the hopper latch on and latch it and keep it latched during the rest of the assembly. looking all over my parts, I don't see any latches or hardware. So I come over here, and lo and behold, there's a box inside the hopper. So I'm assuming my hardware is in there. They don't tell you it's in there. But then I go to pull the box out, and it sticks right on the top. There's a lip right here that won't allow the box to come out. So I'm going to cut through the top of this box and try to take some stuff out manually so I can kind of collapse that box. So no hardware, just a bunch of metal pieces. And I've checked through all this other stuff, all these bags, no hardware. So the next natural place to look was inside the grill itself. And hey, found some more boxes. So hopefully the hardware is in there. So we're trying to get these boxes out of here that you can't lift them up. It's really tight. They won't come out. We'll come to find out a little bracket down here is inside the styrofoam, so you gotta slide these out. The other side won't slide out, but I think now we can pull this box out maybe sideways this way. All right, the top box inside the cook chamber has a lot of the hardware. I did find our latch and a knob, I'm assuming is for the door itself on the hopper. And I'm assuming some of these screws are the screws that I need to attach that. It appears this instruction would be helpful if they had unboxing instructions as well. All right, we've got the cook chamber emptied out. I have parts laying all over my shop, everywhere. Crazy amounts of parts. Now, this stuff is packed pretty tightly, and it's probably for good reasons. For, you know, shipping, sometimes it's not the greatest, and they want to keep these things from getting banged up. So everything's really, really tight. But with that being said, don't just go pulling and yanking on things when you're taking this stuff out, because there's some plastic and some lighter gauge metal on some of this stuff. And if you go yanking on it, trying to get it out, you're going to bend or break something. So sacrifice the styrofoam whenever you can, and this stuff will slide out. So we're going to start on the first part. Step number 1. Okay, we're starting at 11:40 a.m. So you'll have a reference as to how long this takes. So in that parts bag, we found this knob with a little orange washer. Just screws onto a post right here. Now we're going to apply the latch to the front. The latch was in the same bag, and they say to use these screws, which are letter D in the list. Now, it would have been helpful if they would have put the letters on all these different screws, so you didn't have to keep referring back to the parts list page. But it takes these right here. All right, done and done. The next operation, it says to close this thing up, and you're going to flip it over so the bottom is up. So we're going to get our big cardboard box, lay it down, and flip this thing over. All right, once you get it turned over, and I found that it's easier to turn it over backwards because the lid stays closed as you flip it over. So we flipped it directly backwards onto the top. And then you got to locate the legs. The legs look like this. And the legs get fastened down here in the corner with 3 screws on each leg. And it's going to take the letter A screws. And I came in here with my Sharpie and I marked the hardware package here because they didn't do it. And a good little tip, just open the end of it here, so these screws can go down this way and you don't lose screws all over the place. A magnetic head screwdriver is very helpful in this operation because it's very hard to start those short little screws back in that confined area, and that magnetic head screwdriver will help you out doing that. Now, these 2 legs here look identical, but they are not, and you'll see that they're not once you try to install them, because the holes line up differently on both sides. So they only go in one spot, so you'll figure out which one goes where. So we've got the legs on. It says do not fully tighten the legs. I'm assuming there's more pieces that we're going to put on up here is why they don't want you to do that. So let's see what's next. All right, the next process was to locate this bar here. Same hole pattern on both sides, and there's no writing on it, so it doesn't matter which way it goes. And then you want to find the plate with the hooks on it. And obviously we're upside down, so you want your hooks to go down. And then 4 screws on that. There's 4 screws on that one there too. There's 4 screws on all of these. And then the front panel that actually says Gravity Series. Obviously you want to make sure the letters are upside down because we're upside down. And you put those in. And you're using screw A again. And the corresponding nut for screw A is over here in this B slot. And there's no lock washers, but these nuts have the little grooves on the flat side of the nut. And I did find it easier to put the nuts inside here than try to fiddle around back in this tight area here to try to get nuts in that side. So I stuck the screws from the inside and then put the nuts over here. The next piece that goes in is this bottom shelf. Make sure that your shelf top is pointed down, obviously, because we're upside down. And it only goes in one way. The front shelf has a 45-degree angle on it, like that. And the rear of the shelf has 90-degree angles on it. And they make it kind of handy if you slide it in this way. It's got this lip here that holds it up. And then it goes underneath here, obviously. And then this side drops in like this. And it's got this lip that holds it up. So you don't have to sit here and try to hold this thing up all wonky trying to get the screws in it. The other nice thing that they do for these 4 screws on this side, they actually put inserts, threaded inserts, if you can see those down in there, to where you don't have to monkey trying to get a nut down in there and get it started. So this uses 16 screws but only 12 nuts. And again, we haven't tightened anything up yet because we're still putting parts on here. I went ahead and got my magnetic tray and just put all my A and B screws and nuts in that because there's so many of them and we're going to use so many of them. So let's see what's next. Now for some reason the instructions have you leaving this leg off in the initial step before you put this shelf in. I assume it's so you can get the shelf in easier, but if you follow the procedure like I did, you know, set it in this way first and then drop this end in, it works just fine. So we don't have to do the next step because we've already got that leg on. Okay, the next step is to find your gasket that goes on your firebox side, and it says to start these 2 screws that are on the cook chamber side of the firebox. And it said just get them started, do not tighten them down, assuming there's something that's going to slide onto those 2 bolts. But let's locate the blower housing next, I believe. All right, we located our blower housing. The first step that they wanted you to do, there's a door on the front of this with a latch. You undo the latch, and then the door slides off. It's just got pins that go into these little holes to take the door off. And they have something stored in there that you got to pull out. So you'll have to do that. And then they tell you this little piece here comes folded over into here. So you got to fold it out against the blower housing this way so it's sticking out towards the front of the barbecue. And then those 2 screws that you started, the blower housing has notches where this thing just slides onto those 2 screws with your blower in here underneath. And then the rest of your screw holes should line up. Now make sure your gasket's not in the way before you start putting screws in. There's the 2 that we originally put in, and then there's 1 on either side, and then there's 2 in here. So make sure your holes are clear before you start screws, make sure your gasket's moved around to where it's out of the way. And it says do not tighten those screws yet. Okay, the next piece you locate is this one, and it's a bracket that goes between the legs and the blower housing. You'll notice there's little tabs on the end. Those tabs correspond with these holes, and there's notches in the legs. So if you throw this thing in here into those notches and you line up those tabs, it sits flush against the leg and flush against the blower housing, and we'll see what screws that gets. I'm assuming it's still those A screws with some nuts. We'll take a look. Alright, we've got that bracket in place. I'm sure it just stabilizes the bottom of the blower housing. Now, during all of this assembly, it does not give any orientation as far as which way screws go and which side nuts go on. So, good rule of thumb is anywhere where something's showing, I would put the screw head and put the nut on the inside. So that's kind of what I've been doing. So like here, I put the screw head on this side and I put the nut over on the other side because it's less visible. And then same on this bracket side here, I put the screw head on the outside, and then the nut just goes up in there as two nuts. So now it says to tighten all of these nuts. So we're going to go through all these screws we put in the legs and nuts. We're going to tighten everything up. Well, I thought I was going to get crafty and use my 3/8 air ratchet to tighten all these nuts up. Well, come to find out, the only metric sockets I have are 1/4" drive. And I do not have a 3/8 to 1/4 drive adapter. I thought I did. Apparently I don't. Well, it is Christmas, and Kelly, I know you're going to watch this. That would be a great stocking stuffer. So see, this end is 3/8 and would go on here. I need one that's 1/4" on this side. This is a 3/8 to 1/2. But I need one 3/8 female to 1/4" male. Great stocking stuffer. So since I don't have that, we're going to use a nut driver and a screwdriver. And remember at the beginning of the video, the instructions said we're going to need a 19mm socket. I thought that sounded kind of big. Come to find out, it's 10mm nuts, 10mm socket. Luckily, I have not lost my 10mm socket like everybody else in the world, because everything seems to be 10mm. Alright, some of them screws were a booger to get to now that everything is installed. And some people will ask, instead of using the nut driver on the socket, why don't you just use a ratchet? Well, if I got a screwdriver on one side and a nut driver on the other, I can turn both of them and tighten those up pretty good. And it's a lot faster. Sometimes when you use the ratchet, it doesn't want to start right away, and it doesn't actually ratchet. But we were fine. Now on the first screws we put in to put these legs in, they were hard to get anything on, any kind of torque. So if you have a screwdriver that's got the nut down here, you can use a wrench on that and get more on it. Now, a lot of people don't realize, if you have a screwdriver like this, the outer edge of this screwdriver, the handle, actually fits in an end wrench, and I'll show you how that works. But this nut driver that came with my 1/4" socket, you can actually put a ratchet on the end of this. So let me show you how the wrench works on that. So if you have a 15/16 socket or a 15/16 end wrench, they fit right on those screwdriver handles. A lot of people don't know that. Or you can use a wrench on this part of the screwdriver as well, if you don't have that little metal socket underneath here. But learn something new every day, huh? All right, the next order of business is there's a wire coming from this door switch here that's tied up with a bread tie, and then this wire here coming from the hopper is, I imagine that goes to the upper door switch for the hopper. It's usually tied with a bread tie here. Untie that. Both of those wires go through the notch in this bracket that you put in here and go through to this side like that. So the next step is to connect our wires. So we just ran 2 wires through here, and then there's another wire that comes from the fan. Now the smoker body wires were tied down in here with another bread tie, and there's 3 plugs that come off of there. At first glance it's a little confusing because you're like, it doesn't show any wire colors or anything, and none of these are marked. So you're like, okay, which one goes into which? Well, how you figure it out is the 2 wires that come from the hopper doors, those are the same type of plug. And I'm assuming they do the same function, so it doesn't matter which plug they're plugged into. On this lead coming from the smoker, there's 1 female, 2 males. And then one of these is male, and then 2 of these are female. So they can only really go together one way. This is the only one that's different, the one that goes to the fan. So there's only 1 plug coming from the smoker body that it will plug into. So the other 2 plug into the other 2 plugs. And then there's a little clip right underneath here that's supposed to hold that wire in place over here, out of the way. But if it doesn't hold it quite out of the way, we'll maybe put a little zip tie in there or something, or we'll kind of clean this stuff up, kind of put a zip tie in here, whatever we need to do to make it nice and clean. But that was the next step. The next operation is to put these wheels on with the supplied axle. And when this axle when it's wrapped up, it looks like a gas shock or something that goes on a door, but it's not. So they give you 3 flat washers with this. It doesn't show a flat washer for this side. And I put the axle through from the front of the barbecue so the nut would be on the back of the barbecue. So you put the wheel on first, and then a flat washer, and then this bushing slips in this way. It's got a little shoulder here that stops it. And then push the axle through. You get another bushing that slips in from this side. It's got a little shoulder that stops it here. Another flat washer, and then a nylock nut. And there's your 19 millimeter that they were talking about right there. So I don't have a 19 millimeter end wrench. Mine stop at 18. So they say to use an adjustable wrench on this little flat spot and a 19 millimeter here. I just use 2 adjustable wrenches or crescent wrenches, whatever you want to call it. Now, you can't over tighten this because it bottoms out before it gets too tight and the wheels won't turn. So it'll stop. The next operation is to put the casters on that side. So these casters are kind of a pain to spin in. But grab it under here, because this little post here is tied to this, and you can just spin it like that. It doesn't look like it's going in because the wheel's turning, but it is. And then once you get it down touching, that's what their little wrench that they supply is for, and it's got to be thin to get underneath there. That's your wrench E. So that a regular wrench is not going to get underneath there between the wheel and the body of the frame. So that's what that's for. And then just snug them up. So the next 2 items we install are heat shields. First one you want has a slot in the middle. The other one has slots on the end. So this one's first. So this is me back from the future. When you're installing your heat shield, make sure this plate that you move back there before you install it comes through this slot and doesn't get stuck back here. It's got to come through this slot for future use. Okay, your first heat shield goes over here on this front side of the barbecue. First thing you got to do is loosen the bottom screws on the upper heat shield. Loosen them enough to where this heat shield will tuck in behind it. And the flange here goes behind the flange out here on the outside of the firebox. It tucks in there. And before you tighten those screws, you need to put these upper screws in, which is letter D screws. One goes here in this little door button bracket, door switch bracket. The other one goes through your leg right there. And they're already threaded in there. You don't need nuts on the back. And then same process for this side. After you get it installed, tighten those two screws back up. So then grab your other heat shield, loosen these two screws down here. Tuck it in behind the door frame here. Letter D screw here. Letter D screw here. There's a threaded nut back there on the back side that you can see, so you don't need to reach down in here. Just get that started and tighten that up. Tighten that one up, and then you can retighten those, and then your heat shield is on. So the next step, it says grab your power unit here. It's got your electronics on it. It's basically a shelf. And grab your antenna, which is wrapped up in plastic. And you're going to screw your antenna onto that lug right there, like a coaxial lug. And then it says to bend the top of the antenna as shown. But it doesn't show the top of the antenna being bent. It does fold, but it shows it just sticking out like this. Now the instructions also show putting some hardware out here and out here, but it doesn't tell you to do it. So we'll show you what that hardware is and we'll install it. So these are little knobs and little hooks that shows going in these holes, and you use the letter A screws from the inside, and these knobs just tighten onto those screws. And remember, this is the bottom, so you want your hooks pointing up. Now on this side, this gets a little bracket like for a cord to wrap up on. Goes over here, and I'll tell you what screws that uses. So this bracket gets letter F screws with letter B nuts on the back. These are stainless steel screws. There's only 2 of them in that pack. Now this is the first time I've had some disappointment with this barbecue so far. It's made out of pretty good heavy gauge steel, and it fits together well, and it was well engineered. But you come out here, you got all this stainless, and they put a plastic end on it. It's kind of disappointing. That very easily could have been a stainless steel cap on there, but plastic. So the next process is we're going to install this shelf, and it takes 4 letter A screws. And what it says to do is to start the top screws, which, looking at this orientation, they're actually the bottom. And it says just to start them. And then you can see the holes here are slotted. So the screw head is going to come through this hole, and then you're going to have to hold the shelf up to start that screw. And they're even showing doing this upside down in the diagram. So the smarter thing would have been to do is to invert that hole. So where when you hang this on here, the small part of the slot would be on the top. And in doing so, this would line up with the bottom hole. And that would have been a lot smarter. You wouldn't have had to hold the shelf up. Now, if this barbecue was turned upright, that would be correct. You could just slide this on, and the screw would go into the small part of the slot, and then this would drop down and line up with the bottom hole. But they show doing this in the upside down configuration, so I don't know why they did that. So this is definitely going to take 2 hands, so we'll get the shelf mounted on there, and then we'll get those top screws started. All right, those screws were a chore. The next process is you're going to connect this probe here to the control unit. And if you'll notice, the prongs are 2 different sizes. So it's only going to go in one way. So you can see the holes are bigger on one side than the other. If it doesn't go in, don't force it because you got it probably the wrong way. So it doesn't take much force. It pushes in really easy. Next thing it says to do is to connect the power cord. Power cord goes to this plug right here. However, it hangs out below the bottom of here. I'm going to do that later. It's going to be a lot easier to do instead of having all this cord hanging off of it. Next process is to take these two cords coming from the barbecue and connecting them to these two cords on the power unit. One's a male, one's a female, so you can't screw that up. One of them should be from the door switches on the hopper. The other one, I believe, goes to the fan over there. At some point, those hopper door switches have combined into one wire. And I'm assuming when you open the hopper door, it shuts the fan down so you don't burn up all your briquettes in the hopper. So when you connect these pin connectors, if you look at the end of the connector, you'll see the pins are higher on one side than they are on the other side of the plug. On both sides, the male and female of the plug. So make sure as you're pushing them together that they're in the right orientation. You should have both the pins where they're on the high side on the same side and then push them together. If you got it turned around, it's not going to go together and you'll probably bend your pins. Okay, next it says to stand this baby up. So I'm going to take our bottom piece of cardboard down here and lay it over here to when I gingerly lay this barbecue down, it'll hit on that, and then the casters and the wheels will be on this side of the cardboard. I'm going to lock those casters before I do it. That way when it starts coming up on the wheels, it's not going to want to take off on me. And then once I got it laying flat on its back, then I'll grab it and attempt to stand it up the rest of the way. I'm pretty sure I can do it. All right, we got her upright without dropping it and causing a bunch of issues. If you don't have a lot of physical strength, I don't recommend you do that by yourself. Get somebody to help you do that. So we are winning here, I think, folks. Let's see what's next. So step number 21, get your ashtray. The tapered side goes to the back and set it inside your firebox. Goes just like that. So the next piece we need is the fire grate that slides in there. So this is what your fire grate looks like. I assume this is where your little fire starter goes right here. But this should slide in right at the top here somewhere. Right there. And that's where that goes. So the next order of business is putting our firebox door back on. It's just these little pins here, you line them up, put the door back on, and then you close it, and this latch hooks right there and closes your door. So the next operation is to get your dampers. They're stainless steel, look like this, and they slide right into these slots. One here, one here. Now back on step one, I had to install this knob. It's actually the next step. But no harm, no foul. Didn't get in the way. Alright, next thing is the handle on our cooking chamber. I opened our door for this operation. Goes in these two holes up here. The handle has these little cups that go right here. These washers go up underneath in this orientation because there's a little divot up in there that you can see. And this washer goes right in that hole, like that. And then you get screws, number or letter C, that come with lock washers on them, which connects this all together, screws into the end of the handle. So got that mounted. Next order of business is our thermometer. Goes in that hole right there. Not a very high quality thermometer. There's no degrees on there. You're looking at smoke, barbecue, grill, and sear. But I'm assuming there's a digital thermometer in here that's going to show you whatever degrees you're running through some kind of probe in here in the firebox. That looks like the probe right there. So there is a digital thermometer, but we may invest in a lot nicer and more accurate dial thermometer as long as we can get it to fit in that hole. Otherwise we won't worry about it, because we do have digital and there is probes. You can get up to 4 probes. They give you one with the barbecue, but we can actually read the temperature of the meat from a distance, Bluetooth or online with our phone with an app. So that's not that important. So next thing, find this stainless steel looking piece with the slots in it. Make sure the big hole goes to the left if you're looking inside the barbecue. And this gets letter D screws to go in these nut zerts. There's one on both sides. And you just tighten that up. Next thing is your bottom pan. Your drip pan goes underneath that. But this is just a pan that catches everything and funnels it down to the drip pan. And there's a little angled brackets, and it just slides in from the back. All right, the next thing is your heat diffuser pan. The opening in this pan slips over the outlet of the firebox, and then these 2 pins here that are in the end will drop down into those holes, and then as you slide it further back, it goes into that narrow slot. Next thing is the actual heat diffuser. That end there slides underneath that, and then the square end drops into this tray on this end. Once you get it past there, it drops down. There's a little lip here on the end, and that diffuses and equalizes all the heat coming out of the burn chamber. Now it says to tighten those screws underneath there that the heat diffuser pan dropped into, but to do that I'm going to pull this drip funnel thing back out of there so I can reach them. Now this grill has 2 different heating variations or cooking variations. As you may have seen already, this has a grill that goes in here for grilling, smoking and all that. In fact, it's a reversible grill for smoking and searing. But if you use the flat griddle in here that comes with this 800 series barbecue, you change the heat diffuser out for this heat concentrator. So you just slide this thing back out of there, and then this piece slides right there in its place, and then all the heat from the firebox is concentrated right up underneath your flat grill. And this thing has to be put together. It's in 2 pieces. You got to put this piece on top of that piece, and then it's got 6 screws that are tapped into the bottom piece, and tighten it all up, and then you just store this somewhere, probably down there underneath maybe. All right, the next thing is this front shelf that goes on here. They tell you to take 2 of the letter A screws and put in the top holes, leave them sticking out, and then you can see your bracket has the slotted holes on top, and they're in the correct orientation for doing this. This just hangs on those screws, which will align these bottom holes with the screw holes, and then you just add another screw to both sides of that. All right, front table is on. It actually folds down, and then when you flip it up, it drops into place and stays up. Now, similar to my last concern with the plastic, also plastic right here. Would not have taken much to just make that stainless. All right, next item is the grill grates. They are reversible. So this one is in the sear position, which pushes the flat portion of the grill up. This one's in the smoke position, where you don't want things to really stick. And this is a finer edge right here. It's kind of a triangle. The bottom side is flat like this. So both of these are reversible. Now, if you're going to use the plancha, the flat griddle, you would take these grills out, take your heat diffuser out, get your heat concentrator, put it in, and then your flat grill slides right into these same grooves. Now, here is the flat griddle that slides in there. And the problem I'm having with this is the bubble wrap that they had around this. I'm guessing when they seasoned this grill, they used like vegetable oil. And vegetable oil over time gets sticky like glue, not like animal fat. Animal fat won't do that. But animal fat will get rancid after a while. So actually, so will vegetable oil. But that's probably what they used, and that bubble wrap stuck all over this grill, really sticky where you can't get it off. So we're going to have to figure out some kind of process to get this off, maybe a lot of hot water or something to get that bond to break. And we'll probably have to re-season this after that process. But that's the problem, Masterbuilt, if you're watching, your bubble wrap is sticking to this thing. All right, the next thing is the two upper racks. They just slide in, and the 550 that I looked at this morning only had one of these grills. I don't know if it came with two, but there was only one in the show model. But there was a place for two racks. And the guy that was there told me that it comes standard with one, and you can move it either on the bottom or to the top. But if I was to buy like the 550 series, I'd buy an extra rack. Say if I was doing bacon or sausage or smoking jerky or something like that, you want as much grill space as you can get. But this one comes with both. And this grill's got a nice little lip on the front. Say you turn your hot dogs the wrong way, they won't roll off the grill. I always cook hot dogs with the grate so they don't roll. But if they did, you're not going to lose them off the grill. And there's a little lip here too to keep the same thing from happening down here. Let's see what's next. So the very last step, your drip tray. And that's another criticism I have early on. The brackets that drip tray glides on are way up underneath there. So you got to try to find them. And fat guys like me don't like bending over that far to see where they're at. And then when you push it in, it's way underneath there. So why not make those channels come all the way out, make your drip tray a little bit longer to where you can see it out here and service it much easier. But that's it. Another early criticism I have is the sticky tape they use to put all of the labels on here. Crazy, crazy sticky. I've been having to use a razor blade, which is inevitably going to scratch my brand new shelf. And this one came off fairly easily, but that one's really stuck. I'm going to have to get a razor blade up in there too. All right, we are all done. We started at 11:40 this morning, and it's just before 4:40 in the afternoon. So 5 hours. Yes, I've been videotaping a little bit, but it doesn't take terribly long, so you could probably knock an hour off of that, which would be 4 hours. And it did say it took better with two people, and with two people it took 2 hours. So maybe possibly 2 hours, hour 45 minutes, like they said. But I doubt it. Probably still take around 4 hours. There's lots of steps, lots of parts. But we got it put together. Kelly doesn't even know we have this thing yet. I'll show her when she gets home. But looking forward to using this grill. And let me show you how it works basically. So this sticker that came with it kind of gives you the functions. It's got an optional flat top griddle with it. It's got sear grates and smoking grates. You just flop them over. You can get up to 225 degrees in about 8 minutes. That's kind of a hot smoke. And then it goes up to 700 degrees. You can get that in 14 minutes after lighting. It's got a gravity-fed hopper, holds 10 hours of fuel. It's got a Wi-Fi Bluetooth capable with the app. It's got digital temperature controls, digital fan controls. It comes with a meat probe, and this will take up to 4 different probes. And that's the power cord there that plugs in underneath. So gravity fed, I heard about this system a few years ago, and even tried to build one for my ugly drum smoker. But I think I had my hopper too small. I could only get up to about 120 degrees. So this fits about 10 pounds of charcoal. They say lump charcoal is better. It's got a airtight seal on top of the hopper that seals your hopper off when it's closed. It's got the switch that lets the computer know that this door is open. It's got another switch down on the firebox for the same purpose. So once you close this chamber, this is airtight. So the fire is burning at the bottom, and some people would think that would burn up all your charcoal. But because the top of the hopper is sealed, there's no chimney effect in there. It traps all the smoke, and there's no oxygen up in this area. So the upper part of the chamber does not burn. The charcoal on the bottom is the only thing that burns because it's the only part that's getting oxygen. Now as it burns, the ashes fall into that ashtray in the bottom through the bottom fire grate. And then as that charcoal burns, the stuff up here just kind of works its way down slowly. So it's kind of like a pellet feed smoker without the auger. It's just gravity feeding the fuel. So as it burns, there's a computer-controlled, digitally controlled fan underneath that blows air on that fire. And how much air depends on how hot your fire gets, obviously. So if you set your temperature, the higher your temperature, the more air blows on that fire. So you can smoke, you can cook, you can do everything you want to do on here. I did figure out that those hooks that we put on that side panel early on those legs actually hold the flat griddle down there on the side. So that's cool. So early criticisms on this thing, you've heard a couple of them already about the plastic and the drip tray that's too far underneath. Pretty solid construction. I'm impressed with the construction. I wish they would have gave me 3 more meat probes, because if it's got 4, why not send 4? These cannot be terribly expensive for the manufacturer. It's not much to this. It's just a probe with a wire on it. So if somebody's paying as much as they pay for these grills, send 4 of these, and that would be a really good selling point, that it's got 4 probes with it. Wouldn't cost you that much more. One of my other complaints is they don't send any extra screws. So there was at one point where I dropped one of my screws down inside the insulation when I had this thing upside down. There's some slots that go, there's like a double wall firebox. This thing's completely insulated. Well, a screw dropped down in there. And luckily, when we turned this thing over, I got the feeling up underneath that lip, and I found the screw as it dropped back down, and I was able to get it out. If not, I would have been short a screw. You can see we used every screw except F, which this was F. This had no marking at all in the book. So this may be for another model smoker. I'm not sure. Maybe that's why they don't letter them. But we had extra screws here. But why not add 2 or 3 extra screws? It doesn't cost that much, and the end user really appreciates that. So I can't wait to get this thing fired up. There is a seasoning process, of course, and a break-in process, and we'll go through all of that. I'm going to take the booklet in with me tonight and have some good reading tonight after I take my lovely wife to dinner and break her the news that we bought a grill today. So I hope the video helps you out. If you bought one of these, it'll get you through a little quicker than if you're going through the directions, and you might be able to cut down on some of that time. And you can keep from making some of the mistakes that I made, inevitably. I'm an above average mechanical person, so I could do it, and watching my video, you could probably do it, but given the directions, you better have your stuff together, I think, building one of these, putting it together. Because unless you're an experienced person, you may not understand some of it. But I'm sure they probably have some technical help to help you out. So we'll come back one time when we fire this thing up, and we'll bring you along for that ride. Oh, one more thing. There's a little nub down here, a little metal nub that I can't figure out what it is. It's nowhere in the directions. I'm assuming something may hang on that, but I'm not sure. If anybody has one of these and knows what that's for, message me in the comment, please. But until next time, stay safe, stay healthy. Check us out on Facebook, Mark Kelly Farm. And we'll see you next time. Love you guys.